G'day, Keithy here, thanks for joining me. So this trip, we're up in Cooktown now, but we've just driven the CREB Track. We've had 6 vehicles come along for the ride. It's been one hell of an adventure and it's blowing its guts off out here. Come and see what we've been up to. So the iconic CREB Track. It's in far North Queensland in Australia. As you can see, I love my maps of Australia. So let's zoom in and have a better look. It's about 200 kilometres north of Cairns, about 600 kilometres from where I live. And the start of the CREB Track begins on the Daintree River crossing here, as you can see, and takes you up some very, very steep hills and down through the Daintree rainforest. Now this is the only place in Australia where the rainforest actually meets the reef. The CREB Track's about 63 kilometres long and it's such a lovely drive. It's an iconic track in Australia, and essentially like the Maytown trip that I put up the other week, it is essentially at the beginning of Cape York. The track's only open seasonally due to the high amount of rainfall that they get up in the Daintree. So usually you'll see it open at the end of August, start of September every year, and it's only open until the wet season begins, which is usually in around December. So you can see there was some clouds there. With the CREB Track, you cannot drive it if it's raining, full stop. It's way too slippery and boggy, and it doesn't take much rain to actually make the track impassable. Thousands of people have been stranded on this track and had to be rescued by helicopter to get them out. Even on this trip here, there was a vehicle that was wrecked from only about a week before, where there was a little bit of rainfall while these people were on the CREB Track and they were stuck up there. So if you live over in the UK, this might seem like home to you. This is a beautiful terrain here on the little drive to get to the Daintree River crossing from the Daintree village. It's only about 10 kilometres long, this little road, and a lovely winding little drive. As you can see, I've also got the fishing rods on because we're going to go to Cooktown following the CREB Track. So for this trip, I led 6 vehicles from the Roving Around 4x4 Club across the Daintree, up through the CREB and to Cooktown. It's a lovely crossing. This crossing can vary in depth, obviously with rainfall and tides, as this is a tidal river. Beautiful crossing at this time of the year was only axle depth. You can see Lieutenant Dan on the back there as well. He loves to come along for the ride. Now I don't recommend taking trailers along the CREB Track purely because the slightest change in conditions like rain, etc. is enough to actually make the track impassable, let alone with the extra weight of a trailer on the back. There's lots of people on the CREB Track this day actually. You can see a couple of vehicles on the other side of the river there. We actually crossed the river first before we had the tyres down. So it's peak tourist season up here at the moment, and COVID has definitely played a part in the reason that there are so many people up here. I've done the CREB Track millions of times. I can't count how many times I've done it, and this time I actually saw more vehicles on here than I've ever seen before. Usually there's only 1 or 2 that you will see on the entire drive, and usually nobody coming towards you. In this case, there were dozens of cars that came towards us on this trip, and as you can see from the footage here, it's pretty hard to find a spot to actually be able to pull off the track and let them pass, or for them to pull over and let you pass on the track. So among the dozen vehicles that were coming towards us on this trip, we actually had probably 3 dozen vehicles heading the same direction as us, which is why we had to cross the river before we aired the tyres down. Usually you can do it on the other side, there's plenty of room over there, but there was already a good dozen vehicles over the other side doing exactly that. So we crossed before we did that. So when you start the CREB Track, you're pretty much straight into it, into the rainforest. The grassy areas there that have been cleared for grazing slowly disappear as the terrain gets steeper and steeper, and you won't notice it in the camera because no camera's ever going to show you exactly how steep the terrain is. Short of getting out and holding a spirit level in front of the camera, this is a low range track and it's not hard, as you can see. There's not really any washouts as such. There's no wheel lifting type driving on the CREB Track, but due to just how steep it is the danger point for this track, and that's why it's only usually open late in the dry season, because the Cookshower Council have had the time to basically run a dozer through and clear the fallen trees off the track and make it safe for people to drive again. So usually it's open late August, early September, and it closes again in December. The
big attraction here is obviously for people who have come up from a long way away, such as, you know, New South Wales, Victoria, Western Australia even. It's a long way for them to come, and they all want to do the CREB Track, and why wouldn't you? Look how beautiful it is. I'm going to shut up now and I'll let you watch a little bit of footage and we'll get back to you later.
Don't know, darling. Lovely little creek crossing. I love this one. Yeah. Yeah, we'll have 5 or 10 and let these other guys get ahead.
So unfortunately we didn't stay at that little creek crossing there for too long. There was a few vehicles there that were held up, funny enough, by a convoy of about 9 or 10 vehicles in front of them who started the track unprepared. And this is one thing that sort of upsets me about some of the trips that I've been on. This convoy of vehicles had 3 vehicles that were compromised before they even began, and they were on their way up to Cape York from Townsville, funny enough, where I live. So one of the vehicles had transfer case issues and a rear diff issue, so he was driving in front wheel drive. There was another vehicle that had electrical dramas, and you'll see we'll go past him in a second here on the walk back down. So the big thing that really irked me about this trip was that these vehicles you're seeing here now have stopped in the middle of the track. There was 3 vehicles in the first convoy, there was about 9 or 10 in the second, and then there was 2 vehicles in the third convoy in front of us. And the lead convoy were all in lovely brand new expensive Toyota Land Cruiser 200 series and Prado or Kakadoos or whatever they're called. But instead of pulling off the track so that they could have a look at the terrain and have a bit of a go at one of the little hill climb challenges on the CREB Track, they decided to park their vehicles in the middle of the track, which meant that nobody heading north or south could get past them while they were doing this. And it's all good to want to have a go at some of these harder tracks. I'm all for that, having a bit of a play while you're out on a trip. Excuse me, but the convoy procedure usually is that if you're going to pull up and spend some time somewhere, and if you've got room to, you pull off the track so that other vehicles coming from either direction can still pass. And in this case they didn't do that, so we were held up for over half an hour waiting for these people to have a muck around. I eventually walked up to the front of all of these vehicles here, which is a fair walk, and what I'm doing now is actually walking back downhill. It's really steep to get back to my vehicle, which you can see there. But I actually went up there and had a chat to them in the lead convoy and asked them why they had to park in the middle of the track. When they had room, they could have pulled nearly a dozen vehicles off where they were parked. Anyway, eventually they moved their vehicles and we could continue on with the track, which was really good because we managed to get past those 3 slower vehicles that were looking at everything, and also the other 9 or 10 odd vehicles in the convoy in front of us. And when you're listening in the background, you might hear the engine on the Range Rovers revving up a fair bit, and that's because, like I said earlier, this terrain is extremely steep. Generally on the CREB track, if you're not going up, you're going down, and you're going to need everything you've got to get up and down these tracks because they are so steep. It's such a beautiful drive. We're coming downhill now, and you can see there's a little bit of moisture on the ground. It doesn't look like much, and it doesn't look like it could pose any kind of threat or hazard. But when you come to some of these little hilly sections on the CREB track, they can be very slippery when they're wet. And as you'll see further on, there's actually a set of wheel ruts from where people have winched up a certain section of track that must have had a lot of rain while they were driving it. Let's continue with the video, guys. I hope you're enjoying it so far. So once you've finished all of the rainforest section of the CREB track, you'll come to the roaring Meg Falls. You can see a lovely little redclaw there. It's a beautiful place to pull up and have some lunch. There are some information signs as you get into the Meg Falls to tell you a little bit about the place. There's a 1.2 kilometre walk you can also take down to the falls. This area here is more of a day use area where you can pull up and have a lovely swim and freshen up. We went in late September, and I'll tell you what, that water was mighty cold, but it was very refreshing after a day on the CREB track. So we had a lovely lunch here, and everybody enjoyed themselves before we continued on. When you continue on after Roaring Meg Falls, you can see the terrain changes a lot, opens up to more bushland type terrain. And you've got about 30 kilometres of this before you get to the very end of the CREB track and meet the Bloomfield Road again. So our final destination for the weekend was Cooktown, and what you're seeing here is images from the lookout in Cooktown. It's a lovely place. It was really, really blowy up here, and the weather wasn't exactly perfect. It was a little bit overcast, and there were some fires in the distance as you saw back there. But it is a beautiful spot, and I highly recommend going to Cooktown if you're going up this way to Cape York perhaps on your little trip. From Cooktown you'll see Isabella Falls here, which is on the way to Battle Camp Road. It's a lovely little spot to pull up and have a dip if you're going through. We made a day trip of this. A couple of vehicles in the convoy decided we wanted to go up there and take a look. There wasn't a lot of water in the falls when we went through this time. Usually there's a little bit more, but this is late in the dry season, and the kids still had fun, had a little swim. Even yours truly decided to go for a bit of a dip while we were up here. So after we visited the Isabella Falls, we decided we were going to head slightly west of Cooktown to have a look at Archer Point. It's a lovely spot to camp, to go fishing, boating, anything you'd like there. It's a lovely view from the lookout as well. Unfortunately, it's usually a pretty windy spot as well, and it wasn't ideal for fishing, so we went to the old bridge to have a bit of a fish. And unfortunately, later in the day, yours truly had a bit of an incident too. Unfortunate, but all good. So that marks the end of another great trip. Thanks for coming along for the ride. If you want more information, or if you want to ask any questions about the CREB track, if you're not from around North Queensland, it's not exactly your local place, feel free to send me a message, or even jump on Facebook and check me out at Chilling with Keithy, and I'll happily answer your questions. I'll happily guide you up there if you want. It's a 600k drive from here, but it's a beautiful track, and I'll go up there any day of the week if it's open. Thanks for joining me, guys. We'll see you next time.